while, I think we are kind of forgetting what we're doing, huh? It's going to take us a little bit to get back in the swing of things. Okay. I have a question. Have any of you guys been swimming lately? Yeah? Where have you been swimming? The creek?
At Ron and Debbie's pool.
At Ron and Debbie's pool?
Aunt Sandy's.
At Aunt Sandy's house? Where have you been swimming, Curtis?
Ron and Debbie's.
Ron and Debbie's. How fun. Isn't it fun to have friends that share their swimming pools with us? Yeah. We've been swimming quite a bit too. Anywhere that we can get in the water. We've been to the creek, wading and exploring. We've been to some friends' house that share their pool with us. And we even have set up sprinklers in the backyard to run through because it's been so hot. You just got a sprinkler? Very nice. Yeah, sometimes that works when it's hot. Well, I want to ask you something. When you're swimming in the swimming pool or in the creek, are you wearing a life jacket? No? Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's important to wear a life jacket. Well, if you don't know how to swim, it's really important to wear a life jacket. But once you learn how to swim, then it's not as important. But life jackets are helpful. I'm going to tell you a story today about a dog. Oh, there's some pictures up there of some swimmers. So I'm going to tell you a story today about a dog that we had, and his name was Rocky. Rocky was a boxer. That was the breed of dog that he was. And they're pretty muscly. They're real dense, and they don't particularly float very well. And they're not usually swimmers because they get in the water and their bottom goes down like this, and then they just go straight down. And they don't swim very well. So we've had several boxers, and they aren't good swimmers. I can tell you that. I've had to get in the water and rescue them. But Rocky is kind of legendary in our family. There's lots of stories about Rocky Dog, and a lot of them are imaginary. But this particular story is a real story that really happened. Now, I have 3 boys, and they're all men now, but when they were like your age was when Rocky lived with us. And Rocky loved his 3 boys. He loved to go on adventures with them. They went camping, they went fishing, they went hiking. Rocky loved to sleep on their beds with them at nighttime, and one of his favorite things to do was wake them up in the morning. And how do you think he did that? Big, slurpy, wet kisses. Now, boxer dogs have those really big, floppy lips, and they sometimes have a lot of slobber. So, it wasn't. But he loved his boys, and they loved him, and it was a pretty special bond they had. Well, one day, it was a hot summer day like it's been lately here, and the boys wanted to go on an adventure way down, as far down the creek as they could go. And so we all packed up our picnic, and we walked down the creek. There was a spot where the rock comes out of the creek, and it goes straight up, kind of like a wall. And right below that rock is a spot that's deep enough they could jump off the rock into that spot and not hit the bottom. It's pretty deep. But to get to that rock, the boys had to swim across the creek to get to that rock to climb out because the beach was on the other side. So off the boys went, and Mom and Rocky sat on the beach to watch. And we were watching them. Well, Rocky didn't like that. He didn't like that his boys were having fun and he wasn't having it. And so he was barking and barking and barking and barking. And they'd say, "Come on, Rocky." And he'd go a little bit like this, and then he'd get back. And then he'd go and he'd bat at the water like this, and then he'd get back. And then he'd go a little bit deeper, and he'd bat at the water and splash his face. And he didn't like that because he didn't like the water. Did you know they make life jackets for dogs? Have you ever seen that? I've seen pictures of them, but Rocky didn't have a life jacket. And I knew he wasn't a good swimmer.
Life jacket out of a blanket.
Oh.
And then it turned into mud
Oh, that wouldn't be good.
Rocky would fight.
And he would sink. Yeah. Well, Rocky was really upset because the boys were having so much fun. And all of a sudden, before I even knew what happened, he jumped out into that deep water and was trying to get to the boys. And guess what happened? His bottom went like this, and he started going down. And there's a picture. Those are boxer dogs. And those guys are having a little trouble. See how the water's splashing in their face? And he was batting out the water and batting out the water, and he'd go under, and his little nose would come out, and he'd bat enough to get just his nose out, and he'd take a breath, and then he'd go back under the water again, and he was fighting and trying to get there. And the boys' eyes were big, and I was standing on the shore going, oh, what am I going to do? Because, you know, a dog has 4 legs, and they have claws on the end of them, and when they're scared, they come out. And so if I went swimming out there to get him, he was going to try to claw onto me, and then I would get hurt and maybe get pushed under the water. That wouldn't have been a good situation. So the boys in here are trying to figure out, should we try to get a stick and get it underneath of him and get it? And he was fighting, and next thing we knew, his back legs started going, and his buns came up in the air. I mean, not in the air, but up on the surface of the water. And he wasn't going under anymore. He was still really batting at the water, and it was splashing in his face, and he was going like that. But his buns were up, and he wasn't going down like a rock. And next thing we knew, he swam all the way across. It wasn't very pretty, but he swam all the way across to his boys, and he got up on the rock with his boys, and he was so happy. Well, see, that guy's swimming. He figured it out. He's swimming pretty smooth. That's how you're supposed to do it when you're a dog. And he got over there, and then the boys got all done playing on the rock, and it was time to come back, and guess what Rocky had to do? He had to jump off that rock and swim back across. But he did it because that's where his boys went. And you know what? From then on, Rocky was a pretty good swimmer. He figured it out, and he went, yes. Well, you know what? Sometimes in life, we bump into things that are kind of hard, and we think we can't do it. Like Rocky wasn't sure he could swim. He wanted to really bad. It was really tempting, and he really wanted to, but he wasn't sure he could do it, and he was kind of afraid. But he finally just jumped in and did it. And we have a special gift from God. God gave us Jesus, and we can ask Jesus to go along with us when we bump into those hard things, just like putting on a life jacket to help go along beside us. Jesus is our imaginary life jacket as we go through life. And in Deuteronomy, God tells us, you've heard that before? Is it? In Deuteronomy 31, it says, I am your God, I am right with you, and I won't let you down. I won't ever leave you. So remember that when you guys are out swimming. Have a nice Sabbath.
There's a statement that says that Jesus, that heaven wasn't a place to be desired while man was lost. That's Jesus' mindset. Jesus also has invited us to be like him. And in Acts, I love this. I'm not preaching, I'm just reporting here, just to be clear, but now all who believed were together and had all things in common and sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all, as any had need. Isn't that beautiful? We're part of a church, and our offering is for world budget. There's people that don't have as much as us, and we have the opportunity to be like Jesus and to share and collectively balance out and put the resources that God's given us as stewards in the hands of those that have needs. So I'm really grateful that our church takes on the world as we're called to do and allows us to be a part of that. And that's where our offerings are going today. Father, thank you so much for preparing and sending your Son because you loved us. Help us to remember that love. Help us to value humanity the way that you have. We thank you for the means that you've given us, and just pray that you will bless our offerings of love. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, we call this family sing time. Are you part of the family? That means you get to sing. I was prompted by a section of our Sabbath school lesson that encouraged us to be sure we understood the difference between faith and presumption. So the two songs that we're going to sing today are dealing with this subject of faith. The first one is 383. No, pardon me, 511. We sang 383 already. 511. And I'm holding my Bible here and going into the second letter to Timothy, where Paul made it pretty plain that he says, "For which cause I also suffer these things. Nevertheless, I am not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed, and I am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day." The song that we have here is written by a man a long time ago. You notice that I like these old songs. And so take a look at the the way the song is laid out, 4 stanzas. In each case, Daniel Whittle says, I don't have an answer for this. But he comes back with the refrain, and he uses that full text that I just read as the answer and refrain to the song. I know in whom I have believed. And I guess more than once when I'm thinking about songs and when I learned them. This is another case of when my dad took time with me as an 8 or 10-year-old to explain, because becoming an Adventist and learning about the Sabbath made a big difference in our family, and we were the only ones in the community, really, in the family. So he wanted to reassure me and encourage me to never be ashamed. This is one of the texts that he cited, and we learned this song together. So the refrain is the musical setting for that final long phrase, word for word. So let's sing, I know whom I have believed. I know not why God's wondrous grace to me He hath made known, nor why unworthy Christ in love redeemed me for His own. But I know whom I have believed, that I'm persuaded that He is able to keep that which I committed unto Him against that day. I know not how this saving faith to me did impart, nor how believing in His work brought peace within my heart. But I know whom I have believed, that I'm persuaded that He is able to keep that which I've committed unto Him against that day. I know not how the Spirit moves, convincing men of sin, revealing Jesus through His word, creating faith in Him. But I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that He is able to keep that which I've committed unto Him against that day. I know not when my Lord may come, at night or noonday fair, nor if I walk the vale with Him, or meet Him in the air. But I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that He is able to keep that which I've committed unto Him against that day. You turn over a few pages to 517. You'll see this man Ray Palmer's name mentioned there. And when he was a young man, just still in university, he was having a very significant spiritual experience for himself, and he had a gift of writing poems, and ultimately wrote a couple hundred hymns. But this is the very first one he did. It was for his personal benefit, as an expression of his own faith. And oftentimes these songs that last for 200 years are that kind of song, rooted in somebody's life experience. And he said of this hymn, I gave form to what I felt by writing, and with little effort, the various stanzas. And I recollect I wrote them with very tender emotion and ended the last line with tears each time. Well, the original had 4 verses, but we have 3 in our hymnal. And these petitions are for hear me, strengthen me, and to guide me. Let's join together as we sing, My Faith Looks Up to Thee. My faith looks up to Thee, the Lamb of Calvary, Savior divine. Now hear me while I pray, take all my guilt away. Oh, let me from this day behold Thee thou. May Thy rich grace impart strength to my fainting heart, my zeal inspire, as Thou hast died for me. Oh, may my love to Thee, pure, warm, and changeless be, a living fire. So while life's dark maze I tread, and griefs around me spread, be Thou my God. Bid darkness turn to day, wipe sorrow's tears away, nor let me ever stray from Thee aside. As a little addendum here, I'd say to the fathers, as you have time to spend with your children, each child was born with a musical mind. And we can learn things that way through music that we will carry the rest of our life. And I am more conscious of that than I've ever been before now, as my father is gone. But I hear his instructions and the songs we sang together when I was a young boy, 6, 8, 10 years old. They're part of my very fabric. So I'm encouraging fathers, whether it's music or other things, teaching moments come and go, and we don't get as many as we'd like. We have to take advantage of them when we have. Thank you for singing together.
Thank you for the music. So I'm really grateful that Pastor Rick Bowles is with us today, and I've asked him to just share a little bit about what's going on in his life, because this is, he said, the first time he's been to our church. And what I can tell you is we've been Facebook friends for quite a few years, and you must have like the biggest Facebook family I've ever seen. But he's able to tell me about my kids, what's going on, and I've never seen somebody leverage that platform as effectively in giving people a sense of belonging to the family of Jesus. So really grateful for that in your ministry, and we're so glad to have you here.
It's good to be here. Can you hear me? You can. It's good to be here. We have driven by, how many times? 1,000 times? Maybe not quite. But we've seen this beautiful church, and now I get to see the beautiful people. And I'm looking at all of you good-looking people. Well, yes, good-looking people. Good-looking. And it is an honor to worship with you today. And Don said, tell them about myself. Well, this is the most important. This is Charmin, right over there. Wave, that's Charmin. She's the most important. She taught at Columbia Academy for how many years? 6 years. We've been in Meadowglade for 15 years and retired about a year and a half ago, and I got a job. This is my dream job. I'm working for ICC. Do you know what ICC is? International Children's Care, and it is just a great honor. It's just a great honor to be involved with ICC, and so we're enjoying life. We've got 2 kids, and we got 3 grandkids, and both of our children and the grandkids are pretty cool. Any grandparents here? Yeah, pretty cool, the grandkids. So we got 3 grandkids down in Portland, and we're enjoying life. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, we thank you that we can spend this time together. We thank you for the beautiful music and for these words that are so meaningful. We thank you for this family and that we can come together in a troubled world and worship you. And we know that you are the end and the middle and the beginning of everything in our lives, and we just submit ourselves to you this morning. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Today, I want to tell you some stories about rescue. The Bible is full of rescue, Genesis to Revelation, rescue, 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 rescue. Moses, children of Israel, Egypt, right? Jonah, and was it a fish or a whale? Rescue. I think it's a fish. And then, obviously, the big rescue story, Daniel in the lion's den. Peter, in the New Testament, twice rescued from Galilee when he was drowning, rescued from the prison, and someone alluded to it earlier, the great rescue, that we as believers will be able to look up and see something the size of a man's hand that gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the ultimate rescue of the universe when Jesus comes. So we're talking about rescue. And did we get that video? We're not going to show it now. It is working. You got it. Okay, at the end, we're going to have a video by a young lady named Lauren Daigle. Some of you may have heard of her, but she's got this video. It's a music video, and it's called Rescue. And it is dramatic, and I got to reading about Lauren Daigle and finding out some things that I didn't know before. And she was from Louisiana, Lake Charles, and grew up in a Christian home. And also in her teenage years, I think when she was a sophomore and a junior in high school, she was sick, some virus or something, and she was homebound. And during that time, she did a whole lot of spiritual growth. And this song that she wrote and sings, entitled Rescue, comes out of those 2 years as a teenager. She's there in her house, and she's just having a spiritual experience thinking about God's rescue. And I want to read you these words, and we'll have this video at the end today. She wrote them all by herself. You were not hidden and hopeless and forgotten. Though you may be in your darkest night, your hardest fight, feeling defenseless with your innocence stolen, I will rescue you. Words of Jesus to us. And the next verse goes on, there is no distance that I will not cover. I will send an army to you and be your armor and shelter. I will rescue you. Those are the words of Lauren Daigle, and we'll watch that video at the end of our time together today. First story I want to tell you is about Alcyon Fleck. And a lot of you, or at least some of you, I presume, knew Alcyon Fleck. And I hear all kinds of stories when I go into work about what goes on with ICC, all the kids all over the world. Recently, we got 59 kids in the Congo. Their parents had been killed by the rebels, and the rebels chased these 59 kids out into the jungle, and these little kids are running around at night with these rebels trying to kill them. We got 59 of those little kids. ICC, International Children's Care, has these things called children's villages. It's where they bring all the kids, and obviously they're very traumatized to go through something like that. So we got 59 of them, and they're getting counseling, they're coming to know the Lord, they're getting medicine, they're getting education, and as time goes on, they will get over their PTSD and they will thrive. But interesting stories. But the story I want to tell you is about Alcyon. And when she was 11 years old, they went down to camp meeting. You know it gets hot down there. She's 11 years old. She's a junior. They go out swimming in the Clackamas River. And I don't know, maybe some of you have swum down there. There's a place called the Rocks, Big Rocks, where people dive in. There's a train trestle going by. And she's not really swimming. She's wading because she cannot swim. She's with Cousin Ruth, and they're wrestling around. And she loses her balance, and she's swept down the river. She cannot swim. She's 11 years old. And she goes down once, and she comes up, but she's sputtering, and she's crying, help, help. And then she goes down again, and in the middle of going down and crying help, she's breathing in water. And so she's going up and down, trying, and she's going down for the third time, and she's screaming, help, help, and there's a train going by. And so no one hears, except there was one guy, and the one guy is a guy named David Parker. And his teenager, he also was going to camp meeting. He dives in and he rescues her. And this is a life-changing event. And some of you have had life-changing events like that. This was life-changing for her because years later, when she was called, there was an earthquake down in Guatemala and all these kids needed rescuing, she realized, she remembered again that time when she was rescued, and then it all came flooding into her mind, everything about rescuing orphans. And she was able to establish ICC. It was a life-changing moment for her to be rescued. And there's a phrase that I'm going to say a few times. And I don't know if you write stuff down, but someone noticed and took action. Everything hinged on that. Someone noticed and took action. And her life was changed forever. So that's the first story of rescue. The second story of rescue happened on a certain date, and some of you were around for this, and maybe you read the newspapers and heard about it. May 8, 2018. May 8, 2018, in the Washougal River, there was a young 28-year-old lady swimming. Her name was Emily McCauley, and she began to drown. And the story was that there was a 911 call that came into the Washougal Police Department, and there was someone on the other end of the line saying there's a woman in the middle of the Washougal River. This was up, there's a swimming hole up there. There's a swimming hole up Washougal River called Big Eddy. And so someone called up and said, hey, there's someone in the middle of the river and they're screaming. And she was screaming. She'd been in this Big Eddy. She'd been in an inner tube. She had no life vest on. She got tipped off. She got into the rapids, and she was going down the river, and she got her foot stuck in a boulder. And there she was with her foot stuck in the boulder, wedged in the boulder, pinned in the boulder, and the water was up to here, and there she was just screaming. Can you imagine it? Talk about PTSD. So she's screaming, and the call comes into the Washougal police, and there's a man there named Frank Reagan, and he jumps into action, and he gets in his car, and he realizes he's got about 7 minutes to figure out what he should be doing in rescuing this woman, because he heard a little bit of the situation. So he's a former SEAL. He's trained in swiftwater rescue. So he realizes, I'm going to get there. I'm going to take off all my armor. I'm going to put on a vest. I'm going to get diagonal ropes tied across the river, and I'm going to go out there. And, what do? You dive down and try and get that foot out from where she's stuck. And also at the same time, you hold her head up, keep her head above the water. And so that's exactly what he does. He takes off his armor, he puts on the vest, gets the ropes tied up, goes out there. 2 hours go by. 2 hours. And at the end of it, and long story short, she's saved. But at the end of it, he's got hypothermia. Everything is numb on his body. She's got hypothermia. She's unconscious. They managed to get her to Peace House. She's admitted as serious and then stable condition, she's thriving and alive to this day. It happened, yeah, amen. It happened because, remember, someone noticed and took action. Someone noticed and took action. And, you know, in our world today, as we're going through what we're going through, and you know what I mean, we're wondering, well, how can we make a difference? How can we make an impact? How can we want to help the situation? It's simply noticing and taking action. There's a biblical story I want you to turn to, Mark chapter 10, verse 21. This is the third story, and it's the story of the rich young ruler, the wealthy young man. Mark 10, verse 21. Mark 10, 21. And you know this story. This man comes running up to Jesus. What must I do to be saved? That's his question. And Jesus begins to respond. You ask me a question, I'll give you the answer. And he begins to give him the answer. The man interrupts him, this rich young ruler, and he says, I've done all of that. And then there's something I want you to notice. It says Jesus looked at him and loved him. Do you see that? There's various different translations, but that's the gist of most of the Jesus looked at him and loved him. And it's not a glance. It's not a glimpse. It's not a passive observation. And the word, the original, is one used when astronomers looked at the universe. When they looked at the universe, you know, they're trying to figure out the constellations. And it's looking at something like you're trying to learn from whatever you're looking at. That's the word. And Jesus did that a lot. And again, thinking about what we can do in this messy world that we live in, it is to look with concentration, to look at people with focus, to really try and learn about people, about what they're going through. Jesus did that. And the New Testament's filled with examples. Zacchaeus, Jesus looking at Zacchaeus, woman at the well, woman caught in adultery, woman with the alabaster box, Nicodemus, all of his disciples, Jesus zeroed in on them. Each one of those disciples, all the people he healed, he looked at people. He noticed them, and he took action. And the action here, and you know, the story doesn't turn out too well with a rich young ruler, but the story here is the action he took was he loved them. He loved that man. And that's something that we need to do today, is to just love people, is to just love people. So many times we have a strings attached. Do you know what I mean by strings attached? We have a pre-planned, hidden agenda. I will love you if you believe as I believe. I will love you if you dress as I dress, act as I act. You know the whole story. I will love you if. I will love you if. But, you know, something Billy Graham said. It is the Holy Spirit's job to convict. It is God's job to judge. It is my job to love. And the Apostle Paul said, you know, there's three important things. What are they? Faith, hope, and love. And the Apostle Paul said the greatest of these is love. There's a lady, it's not Ellen White, it's another lady, that had a lot to say about love. And I want to read a bunch of things to you, what she said about love. She said, spread love wherever you go. She said, it's not how much you know that matters, it's how much you love. She said, if you want to change the world, go out and love people. Do you know who this lady is? Mother Teresa of Calcutta. This is what Mother Teresa, you've heard of Mother Teresa? This is what Mother Teresa said, and she says a whole lot more things. She said, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. She said, don't do great things, do small things with great love. She said, love others the way God has loved you. She said, the issue is not how much you do, but how much love you put into what you do. She said, we can cure physical disease with medicine, but the only cure for loneliness, depression, and hopelessness is love. She said, and this is kind of somber, because it's talking about our mortality. At the hour of our death, when we come face to face with God, we will be judged not by what we have done, but how we have loved. She also said, go out in the world and love the people you meet. And finally, she said, I am just a pencil in the hand of a writing God, writing a love letter to the world. Those are words from Mother Teresa, but they're all applicable to us today. But how do we love like that? That's yeah. How do we do that? Another story, another rescue story. Mark 1:41. You're already in Mark. Go back to Mark 1:41. Right at the beginning of Mark, there's another guy running towards Jesus. We had the rich young ruler running toward him. There's another one coming toward him. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus has already been baptized. He's already called his disciples, already healed Peter's mother-in-law, and it was a leper this time. And we don't have leprosy, Hansen's disease, like they had back then. I think they used to have it here in the United States, but you've heard, haven't you? I mean, the body decays and all, it's just like total shutdown, and it's rotting flesh. And Jesus looked at this leper, and he saw everything that was going on with him, stigmatized, ostracized, isolated. He was kept away from his family, his friends, society, everything in culture. And when the lepers lived outside the cities, but when someone was near them, they had to cry out, unclean, 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 keep away. And so this leper's before Jesus, and he's depressed, and he's overwhelmed, and he's desperate. And Jesus looks at him, and he sees that he's at the end of his rope. This guy is just like, he's looking at Jesus like, Jesus is my only hope. And Jesus, you can see it there, has a visceral response. I looked up the word visceral, but do you know what I mean by visceral? It's like a physical response. It says that Jesus was moved with pity. He was moved with pity. Other translations say deep, deep compassion. And it's really interesting when you study some of the original words, the word is splag, S-P-L-A-G. What a funny sounding word. Splag, splag. The word used is splag, and the transliteration is spleen. How in the world? What does that mean? You know, what's behind all of that? It was saying Jesus was moved to the very depths of his being. Where is your spleen? It's somewhere way underneath there. He was moved to his guts. He had a visceral reaction when he saw this guy. And here is the God of the universe looking at this man that is so pitiful, and it's beyond him. Jesus looks at him, and he's just touched. And the way we can understand it is when we suffer a loss. And I think I have had this, and you've probably had this. When we suffer a loss, we have a heartache. Haven't you? Had a genuine physical pain. This is what it's talking about, is this splag, this inside, this deep, deep feeling of compassion. That's what Jesus had. And it says there that he touched the man. And that's another word that's very interesting. I don't pretend to be a Greek scholar, but it's sympatheo. it means that it's not a touch like this. This particular word means a long, lasting, tight, healthy embrace. It's not a pat on the back, it's just a total embrace. This is what Jesus did. No one in those days touched the lepers. Jesus wasn't just touching him, he was embracing him, he was hugging them. That's what the original word says. Jesus noticed and took action. He did something. Which brings us to the next story, which is, if we could get that picture on the screen, the picture of the young lady and the little boy, if we could have that first. Yeah. This is Judith, and this is Daniel. And I will tell you about Judith and Daniel. Judith grew up at Patmos Children's Village. It's an ICC village over in the Congo. And I want to tell you a little bit about it. In the Congo, in the midst of Africa, there's there's Rwanda on one side, the Congo on the other side, and then there's this gigantic lake. It's about 60 miles long, and in the middle of the lake, there's an island. So the lake is called Kivu, K-I-V-U. The island is called Idjwi, I-D-J-W-I. Lake Kivu, big island, 40 miles long. It's a big island. And on this island is this children's village, aptly named Patmos Children's Village. It's on an island. And Judith grew up there. So I don't know her background, but as with most of these people, these little kids from these children's villages, they're traumatized. Something horrible has happened. Obviously, their parents are gone, but something horrible has happened. She was brought at some time to the children's village, and she received education and nutrition and medicine, and she received everything, and she came to know the gospel. She came to know the gospel. She came to know the good news. She came to have compassion because of what she learned about she was a Jesus follower, about the life of Jesus. And she came to believe that with love, the world could be changed. So she is a little kid there. She grows up, gets her education. She moves out to a city called Goma. And this is a fresh story. This is about 2 years old, maybe 3. She moves out to a city called Goma in the Congo, and she's got a job, and she's living an independent life. And then something happens, and let's put that next picture on. What happens far too many times is these people get in boats that are overloaded and overcrowded, and the winds and the waves come up, and they're, who knows how the boats are repaired, and they capsize. They capsize. And this is not the particular boat sinking that I will talk about in a few moments. This is just an example. Can you see? This is just an example. So you see, obviously, the boat's going over, it's tipping over, and there's a bunch of people going off one side, and you can see the people already, they're headed out. They don't want to be sucked down. And so what happened was, and the date was April 15, 2019. So this is a fairly fresh story. What happened was the boat capsized. There was 150 people on it. There was 37 that were saved. And it's somewhere right outside of Goma where Judith is living. And she's every day walking to work, and she's seeing the bodies being brought in, the rescue effort and all of that. And as she's walking to work, going past the marketplace, on one day, she sees a little boy. On 2 days, she sees a little boy. On 3 days, she sees a little boy. On the 4th day, she stops and talks to him. What's going on? He was on the boat. And he tells her, my dad and mom and grandma were on the boat, and I can't find them. And so, what do you do? She takes him home, finds out his name, Daniel, 4 years old, and she cleans him up and she loves on him. And, most naturally, she's only about 40 miles where she grew up at Patmos Children's Village on the island of Idjwi. She takes Daniel back there, and Daniel is back there living, getting medicine, getting education, getting nutrition, having house parents love on him, and coming to know the Lord. This is a true story that's happening right now. And it happened because there was a young girl named Judith who had a compassionate heart. And she, as we've been talking about, she noticed and took action. Dramatic story. Compassion is what we all need to be involved in 24/7. If we're followers of Jesus, because that was what he was involved in 24/7. I want to close this last story talking to you about my mom. I grew up in Southern California. My dad was a chiropractic physician. I grew up in Pomona, if you know where Pomona is. Claremont, actually, we grew up in Claremont, but Pomona is a big city. People know it. When we moved to Walla Walla, we were there for 13 years. My mom and dad moved up. My dad passed away. When we came over to Meadowglade, we brought my mom with us. So she's passed away now, but we had her for several years over here in Meadowglade. But I want to tell you about her early life. She was raised in dire poverty, and her dad died when she was 3 months old. And they were just poor, very poor. In Iowa, a place called Cedar Rapids. Somehow my grandma scraped together some money to put her in Seventh-day Adventist boarding school, a school called Oak Park Academy. But then the money ran out. Now there'd been one highlight in my mother's life for years and years and years. When she came to church, she had a tough childhood. When she came to church, there was a lady named Mrs. McDonald that loved on her. And I know that probably in this church you have that. There's all kinds of Mrs. McDonalds around. But this Mrs. McDonald was just so nice to my mom. She knew my mom came from a damaged background, and she just loved on my mom. And so possibly Mrs. McDonald may have given some money so my mom could get to boarding school. But the money ran out, and the day came when the business manager came to my mom and says, you got to pay or you can't stay here. And they couldn't pay, so she left the boarding academy. And she became a wild child. She really struggled with this. She was mad and angry and began seeking out everything that she shouldn't be seeking out. This is how her life was spiraling downward. And the only good thing about her life, as she would tell me years later, is this Mrs. McDonald would always love on her at church, and this was great. But then a tragedy happened, and the McDonald family moved away. So my grandma was trying to do everything she could, but the situation was going down like this. The day came when they received a letter from Mrs. McDonald. And Mrs. McDonald said, I had a dream the other night. And she said, in my dream, I dreamed that I was standing on the edge of a river, and it was one of these swift, it was fast, the current was going. And she said, in the river there were people, and those people were teenagers. And she said, this is all in her dream, Mrs. McDonald's dream. She said, and she's telling this in a letter to my mother. She said, I ran along the side of the river, and I was reaching in, and I reached once and got a hold of a teenager, but lost them. And I reached twice, and the same thing happened. And I reached a third time, and I got a hold of a girl's hair, and I pulled her out. And when I pulled her out, that girl was you. He's talking to my mom. This was all in a letter. And you can imagine how my mom felt and how my grandma felt. And Mrs. McDonald said, well, this is a sign. And my grandma felt, this is a sign. And my mom, this is a sign. And so Mrs. McDonald said, why don't you come and live with us? And so they moved a long ways away. They moved from Iowa back to a place called Madison, Tennessee. And my mom's life was changed. And it was changed, back to that phrase, because someone noticed and took action. Man, I don't know who that my mother tried to find this Mrs. McDonald years and years, spent a lot of her life. Where are they? Well, never found. When we get to heaven, we will hopefully see Mrs. McDonald. We need to have that type of compassion. I want to read you what people have said about what we can do today in Clark County. We still in Clark County? We're not in Cowlitz. Clark County, still in Clark County. This is what Grace Grogan said: all around us there are people who need rescuing. Strongest hands loosen their grip, greatest minds get cloudy, biggest hearts break. Damien Barr said, we're all in the same storm, but not all in the same boat. Some are in super yachts, others in regular yachts. Some are in rowboats, some are in canoes, while others with no life vests on are out in the wind and the waves, and they're going down for the third time. Psychologist Leo Buscaglia said, too often we underestimate the power of a touch, a smile, a kind word, a listening ear, an honest compliment, or the smallest act of caring, all of which can potentially turn a life around. Anonymous said, hug the hurting, kiss the broken, befriend the lost, love the lonely. When you see someone falling behind, walk beside them. When you see them ignored, include them. Throughout your life, always be sure to remind people of their worth. You never know when one small act, one small word could change their entire life. And Ellen White, and I've compressed a whole bunch of Ellen White stuff together. I hope you don't mind. Because someone's going to say, where was that found? Well, I don't know where this is found. But are you ready for Ellen White? This is what Ellen says. She says, we don't have to go to heathen lands. You've heard that before. We don't have to go to heathen lands. Get close to people. Become intensively interested in them. All around us are those who are broken, fearful, confused, ignorant. And then she says, care for the sick, comfort the sorrowing, go to where it hurts, and enter places of pain. That's what Ellen has to say. And finally, there's one author just writes a huge lot of stuff. She ties it all together. Her name is Anonymous. She ties it all together when she says, remember that today somebody, somewhere is counting on each one of us to do what God has called us to do. I'm getting ready to close. Do I have time? Another 2 minutes? Then we'll watch Lauren Begley. Do you have that video? That's fine. That's fine. It's good words. That's the words of the video rescue. We got this world situation. And, we don't have enough fingers and toes to count all of this stuff that's going on, right? It's just like, wow. What can we do? Well, we can't rescue people like David Parker rescuing Alcion or Frank Reagan rescuing this Emily McCauley. But there's two things we can do. I'm going to end with this. There's a philosopher, educator, her name was Maya Angelou. She said, people will always forget what you say and do, but they'll never forget how you make them feel. Have you heard that? And of course, the other thing is just to notice people and to act. Margaret Keyes, I tried to find her. She's out of my childhood. And of course, with social media, and Don mentioned all my social media folk, with social media, we know all these people nowadays, but I've never found Margaret Key. She lived down the block when I was a little boy, nice little girl, not a romantic interest, just played with her and just enjoyed the whole Keys family. So the day comes when I'm supposed to go to the first day of kindergarten. I did not want to go. And I was doing what they call a meltdown. I don't think they had those words back then. But do you understand the word meltdown? So I was doing everything I could to stop from going to the first day of kindergarten. And by about 11 o'clock, my mom gets me there. And I'm in the door like this. And my mother is pushing me. And the teacher is pulling me. And I'm in the middle of my little meltdown, first grade or kindergarten. And by this time, all the kids had their little mats out and they were on the floor taking a rest. And Margaret Keys was on her little mat halfway across the room, and she saw that I was making a real jerk out of myself. And she raised her little hand, and in a little voice, she says, "He can come beside me." How that made me feel. How that made me feel. You know, obviously, boy, I was there. I was right next to Margaret, taking with my little mat. You know, I can remember it to this day. And you probably have stuff like that from your life, where you remember how people made you feel. I want to close with just going back to the beginning, that I said I was going to tell 6 rescue stories, but did you realize that there was only 5? Because in truth, the story of the rich young ruler was not exactly a rescue story. He really, when he came up to Jesus and said, "What must I do to be saved?" he wanted to be rescued, but yet he turned his back and walked away. And the challenge for all of us is that we have to recalculate our Christianity on a continuous basis. You may have chosen Jesus 5 years ago, and that's great, but you need to do that today. You know, years ago, we hadn't ever heard the word recalculate. Do you ever hear the word recalculating? When you're trying to go somewhere and you get lost and you're looking at or whoever is talking to you in an artificial voice, and they say, recalculating, we have to recalculate. Now, I want to end with the words, and this will end our worship service today. We'll just play this video, and that'll be the end of our worship service. This young woman, Lauren Dagley, and you'll hear her sing these words in just a second. You are not hidden, hopeless, and forgotten. Though you may be in your darkest night, your hardest fight, feeling defenseless with your innocence stolen, I will rescue you. There is no distance that I will not cover. I will send an army to you, and I will be your armor. I will be your shelter. I will rescue you. Make the choice today. I'm going to make it today. All of us need to make that choice today to be rescued. May the Lord bless your Sabbath day.